academic institutions in Israel, in Europe, and is now joining us today in Los Angeles from afar. She is a 10th generation Jerusalemite, which is extremely special. And especially now when Israel is always on our minds, just a wonderful fact to share with us. So thank you for sending that to us as well. And she earned her doctorate at Hebrew U and her rabbinic ordination at HUC-JIR in Jerusalem and Cincinnati in 2002. She's involved in various research projects and active in promoting liberal, non-Orthodox Judaism in Israel, which we always need to be working on. And we at Sinai Temple think about that topic and always glad to partner with others who are doing that work. She has written for academic and popular journals and publications, and Rabbi Marx is the lead editor of the Israeli Reform Sidur, Tfilat HaAdam. Her book, From Time to Time, Journeys in the Jewish Calendar, which we are discussing today, was translated to several languages and available in English from the CCAR Press. She is the author of When I Sleep and When I Wake on Prayers Between Dusk and Dawn, and a feminist commentary of the Babylonian Talmud, and then About Time, Journeys in the Jewish-Israeli Calendar, and the co-editor of a few other books. And Rabbi Marx lives in Jerusalem with her family. And we are just so honored to have you, and so timely that we are meeting now in the month of Elul as we're preparing for the High Holy Days, and that we get to discuss your book, From Time to Time, Journeys in the Jewish Calendar, and that we get to learn from you. That because in addition to the books, you're right, you have such a breadth of knowledge, and we're so honored to have you here with us on Zoom, online, in our live stream. So I want to welcome you and, one, to just say Shana Tova. Shana Tova to everyone here, Shana Tova to you. And I want to let everyone know the format of this morning, as our book talks tend to go and our conversations go, that we're going to do a half hour or about a half hour where Rabbi Marx will present to us and be our teacher this morning. And then we'll have a half hour where the audience can put in questions in the chat, and I'll ask some questions and we'll continue our conversation. So thank you so much. And we're just lucky to have you this morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Korngold, and thank you, Rabbi Harrison, and thank you very much, Roy, for organizing all this. It's great to be with you. It's always good to be with the Jewish communities, and I know that your community is a very vibrant and very important community, and especially it is important for me to be with you, Temple Sinai in Los Angeles, because my dear friend, Julie Mendelssohn of blessed memory, grew up in your congregation, and she told me a lot about her experience there. So Julie of blessed memory, we were close friends. She was a neighbor. We used to have a Friday morning breakfast at the gym every week for years and years. We were members of the same Rosh Chodesh group. And I remember her with a lot of love and pain. I'm not sure that Golda is with us today, but if you are, Golda, this is dedicated to the beautiful memory of our Julie. So this is, we are in the month of Elul, as Rabbi was saying, and this is a good time to talk about time. In fact, Rabbi, I'm not going to talk about my book. I'm going to talk about a topic from the book. The book is about time, as you know. It's called From Time to Time. It is divided by the month. Maybe later we'll see a little bit about its structure. But it has about 100 what we call iyunim, that is to say short essays. Each one of them can be open to great discussions. There's also a study guide that you can download for free. And today I would like to speak with you about one topic, and this is the shofar. It's a good time to talk about shofar because in many congregations we blow the shofar every morning on Shacharit, and then we approach Rosh Hashanah, which is the day of the shofar, and also Yom Kippur. But first of all, it's a good time to talk about time when we approach the new year, and we think about how time passes. This year was not an easy year. I think for none of us here in Israel, it's very difficult. I'm talking with you from Jerusalem, so things are relatively normal for us. Uh, I think people are sad, but life is normal. When I talk to my colleagues and friends and students who live in the north and in the south, they live under really unbearable situation these days, these months, which I hope that we will be able soon, if we talk about time, that soon we will be able to talk about in past tense. So this is a time to think about time in general time, Jewish time. What does it mean to be Jewish in time when we live in so many structures of time? How does it work? I read somewhere that the noun time, is the most frequently used noun in the English language. And in the top 10, you also have day and year. So we think about time constantly. We think about the passing of the time, the flow of the time. We think about the circular time, the cycle of the day and the cycle of the week and the cycle of the month and the cycle of the year. And in our Jewish tradition, we also have a cycle of 7 years, the sabbatical year, we have a cycle of 49 years, the Jubilee. So we think about time a lot when it's a circular time, when it's a linear time, our personal line, our personal history, and the history of the world. According to our tradition, the world was created at a certain point, and it will be redeemed, hopefully, at the end. So at each moment is unique. That is to say, even if we met at the same date next year and talk about the same topic, we will be different. The world hopefully will be different for the better. Everything will be different. As the Greek philosopher said, you cannot enter the same river twice. So each moment is unique, and at the same time, everything is circular. That's how we build our spiral. That's, I think, how we experience our life, by unique moments, but also the repetition. But I don't want to talk so much about um, general themes. I want to talk about the shofar. Do you see the slides well? Is it in the form? Okay. So
Yes, it looks great.
Thank
Perfect.
you very much. So I call this session the wordless ritual in the wordiest of days, right? High holidays, as you know, are days when our prayers are very long. Sometimes we spend basically the entire day in the synagogue, and our texts are very prescribed and long and what can I say, worthy. And then comes the shofar, and the shofar is nonverbal. It's not even music, it's something else, and it does something to us, which I'm not sure I understand. I want to bring you an opinion that we will see later today, but of why does it make us to tremble so much, the shofar? But I don't know if this riddle, if this mystery can be solved. There's something that happens to us when we hear this primordial, primal, untamed voice of shofar, right? And we've all been in situation, maybe in your shul, no, but in places that I've been, that a person stands with a shofar and not a voice comes, it's a little squeak comes out. So it cannot really be planned, or you cannot really play with it. It's something that is really uncontrollable. And the sound of the shofar is something that is very, that touches a place in our soul that is very profound and very ancient and not very easily explained. That's why in the COVID years, when we were online all the time, we heard the shofar online, but I'm not sure it was the same thing. It also makes us something, but I think it was a little bit different. So this is what I would like to talk about with you today. So this is the cover, as you already seen. This is the cover of my book that I'm happy to, if you are interested in it. I'll just tell you up front, I don't get any royalties for it, so I'm not gonna make any money from it. But it was published by the CCAR. You can download the study guide or the Spotify song list that appears in the book. And maybe later we will talk a little bit about it, but now I want to sort of zoom in into one of the iyunim, of the little essays that are in the book, and that's the shofar. So here are the topics that I would like to talk about. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them because there's a lot to talk about when we get to the shofar. We'll get to whatever we get. And if there's a discussion or questions, of course, I'm happy to respond. And Rabbi Korngold will present the questions to me. First of all, I would like to talk about words versus music versus sound. Then I would like to talk about Rosh Hashanah and shofar. And then I would like to talk about a psychoanalytic understanding of what is the shofar and how does it affect us. Shofar in Jewish law and in Jewish lore, of course, in a very on a nutshell, in a very very short form. Shofar in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, and what do we actually do when we blow the shofar? What are we trying to do when we blow the shofar? And I would like to show you that there are two very clearly defined separate ways of why we blow the shofar and how it affects us. So let's go to our road. First of all, words versus music versus sound. The shofar makes a sound, but I don't know if we can call it music. I know that some pop, Matisyahu and other Jewish artists use the shofar sometimes in their music, but the shofar itself, you you cannot play on it. That doesn't have what's the word, notes, and you can't really. It has its sound. So there's something very primal about it that somehow gets to our souls in a way that sometimes words cannot, right? Because it's not something that is intellectual. We can read a beautiful poem, a beautiful tefillah, and it affects us. But when we hear this sound, it's kind of, it goes right inside. It's not a cognitive understanding. It's something that goes to our soul in a very indirect way. When I think about the creation of the world, right, the really first generations, we hear about the children of Lamech. There are two dynasties in the beginning of Genesis. One dynasty of Cain and another of Seth. Seth was the youngest child of Adam and Eve. And you can see that right at the beginning, the first generations of the world, we have Yuval. And Yuval, we hear about him that he was Avi Kol Tofes Kinor Ve'ugav. He was the ancestors of all music players. And only later in this chapter, only later, toward the end of the chapter, we hear about Seth, who was the youngest child of Adam and Eve. And it says Adam also had to him also there was born a son, and he called him Enosh. By the way, we use in Hebrew, we use the word Enosh as human. And then it says, and it was then that the eternal began to be invoked by name, as huchal likro b'shem Hashem. So you can see that the invocation of God's name came after the invention of the music. And by the way, the name of the inventor or the ancestor of all players, his name is Yuval. Today we use it as a name, by the way, for boys and for girls. And Yuval, according to Rashi, it means a ram also, right? So he's called after something that we can make music from, can make the voice of the shofar from. I move to the next thing, shofar and Rosh Hashanah. So when you open the Torah and you want to understand what is the meaning of the Chagim, why do we celebrate Sukkot? Why do we celebrate Pesach? In some cases, it's very clear. You get more than one explanation, but you get explanations. What about Rosh Hashanah? The Torah doesn't really explain to us why we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And by the way, when I say Rosh Hashanah, of course, this is a name that does not appear in the Torah or in the Bible at all. It appears only once in the Bible, and it does not talk about our Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah, the New Year Day, was not a New Year Day in the times of the Torah. It was the first day of the seventh month, right? Remember the ancient Jewish year or the ancient Israelite year began on the month of Pesach, on the month of Nisan. So this is what the Torah has to say about what we call Rosh Hashanah. In the seventh month, the first day of the month, you shall observe a sacred occasion, Mikra Kodesh. You shall not work at your occupations. You shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. Actually, this is not a great translation now that I think about it, because it doesn't say that the horn is sounded. It says that this is a day of sounding of a blow of something. It doesn't say what is played here, right? So on this day, the first day of the 7th month, what we call Rosh Hashanah, and remember, initially it was just one day, it is called Yom Tu'ah, a day when a blow is sounded. That's in Numbers 21, in Bamidbar. We hear it again, we see another explanation in Leviticus, in Vayikra 23, and then it says, it speaks about Rosh Hashanah as Zichron Truah, a commemoration or remembrance of blowing, probably of horns. Later tradition said, okay, normally it's Yom Tuah because we blow the shofar on that day, but on Shabbat it's Zichron Tuah, commemoration of the blowing of the shofar. I don't know what is the minhag in your congregation. If you blow the shofar, you don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. In some, in Reform congregations you typically do, but halachically or traditionally you don't. So instead of blowing the shofar, you don't call it Yom Tuah, you call it Zichron Tuah, a commemoration of Tuah. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is to show you how cryptic this whole thing is, because we don't really understand why you have to blow and what you have to blow and what is the sound and why do you do that? What is the meaning? What is the nature of Rosh Hashanah? The Torah does not tell us that. The rabbis do. For the rabbis, Rosh Hashanah, the New Year day, is Hayom Harat Olam, that today the world was conceived. According to one tradition, the world was created on Rosh Hashanah, and according to another midrashic explanation, today the human being, the initial human beings, Adam and Chava, were created. But it doesn't really say much about, in the Torah, why do we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and why do we have this truah, this blowing of whatever it is. It does not talk about shofar. But in other places, you do have, we do have specifically talking about the shofar, and especially in the Nevi'im, in the prophets. But I brought you here the text from Exodus, from Shemot, in which is depicting the Sinai revelation, that grand revelation that we all attended. Those who were there, those who were not there yet, those who are going to be born, even those who were Jews by choice, their souls were there according to our tradition. And it says the following. Oh, wait a second, I can't see that. Just a second. And on the 3rd day in the morning, of course, from feminist point of view, there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say about this chapter, but I'm going to talk about just one aspect of it. And on the 3rd day in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a sound of shofar exceeding loud. V'kol shofar chazak me'od. I think the translation here is good. It doesn't mean that it was a very loud voice of shofar. It means that the voice of the shofar, the sound of the shofar, became louder and louder. And then we read, I'm going to verse 18, the Mount Sinai smoked in every part because the Eternal descended upon it in fire, and the smoke of it ascended like a smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And once again, and the voice of the shofar sounded louder and louder. And now we hear something that a lot of commentators find difficulties to explain. Moshe speaks, and God answers him with a loud voice, right? So what's going on there? There's something very mysterious going on. Who's blowing the shofar? Who's making the voice of the shofar, right? So some commentators say it was the angels. Fine, but we don't really have angels in this capacity in the Torah. Some say it was God who blew the shofar. But you also have another explanation, which is even more risque, I would say, or even chutzpahdik. We'll get to it in a second. But first of all, let's see more verses from the following chapter, Exodus 20. It speaks about this I don't know how you call it, multi-senses experience. And all the people saw the voices and the lightnings and the sound of the shofar. You can really see the voice of shofar. It's something that was really all over you. And then the people say to Moses, it's verse 16, speak you with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. They heard these voices of the shofar and the lightnings, and they were very much afraid, because in a way they associated the voice of the shofar with the voice of God. So maybe, and here I'm quoting the theory of Theodor Reich, maybe what they were hearing is not God blowing the shofar. Maybe the voice of the shofar is the voice of God. So Theodor Reich, who was one of the prominent disciples of Sigmund Freud, took the concept that Freud talked about in his book Totem and Taboo, and said that the totem, that is to say, the ancient animal that peoples have, the ancient totem, the ancient deity, as it were, of the Israelites, was the bull, the par, right? The par. That's why when Moses did not descend fast enough from Mount Sinai, they built a golden calf. And we hear the concept that we hear about the bull or cow throughout our culture, throughout our history, in ways that it seems like someone is concealing something. So this is what Theodor Reich said. The voice of the shofar is the voice of a bull when it's slaughtered. So it brings to us, and I'm not proposing for us to accept it. I think it's just very interesting. He's saying that when you hear the voice of the shofar, you think about a bull that is slaughtered, and it brings sense of tremblance and guilt in you. Why? Because the Israelites wanted to kill a father, right? Freud, right? You want to the Oedipal complex. You want to kill a father. It's not very clear about the mother in this context, but that's what you have here, and that's why the voice of the shofar is a reminiscent or a presentation of God's actual voice. Yeah, that's what he said. We can go deeper in it. He wrote an entire book called the Shofar. I'm sure it was translated to English. It's also translated to Hebrew lately, and I think it's a fascinating reading, right? To hear what he has to say about that. His book that came out in 1919, of course, in German. I'm moving on to shofar in Jewish law and lore. Of course, we could spend the rest of the next few days just talking about shofar and law, but I wanted to bring you just one paragraph, or actually two paragraphs about the laws of the shofar that I think somehow are relevant to this year more than to other years. Okay, so this is from Tractate Rosh Hashanah in the Mishnah, chapter 3. And Rabbi, when you want to stop me, just don't hesitate to stop me. So it says, one who blows a shofar into a cistern or into a cellar or into a barrel, right? In Hebrew, it sounds better. הבור או לתוך הדות או לתוך הפיתס. Yeah, if you blow, why would you do that, right? You don't want to sound the voice of the shofar so everyone can hear. Why do you direct it into a pit or to a tunnel or to a hole in the ground? And does it qualify? If you do that and people heard it, do they fulfill the mitzvah of shofar, of hearing the voice of the shofar, or didn't? And the Mishnah answers, if they heard the voice, the sound of the shofar, they have fulfilled the obligation to hear the shofar. If they heard the sound of an echo, in Hebrew it's kol havara, right? Just the echo of the voice, they have not fulfilled their obligation. And I'm thinking this year in particular about all these people who are in cisterns and holes in the ground and tunnels. Do we hear their voices? Are their voices heard? What can we do to hear their voices better? So this is something that is on my mind. I'm sure it's also on your minds, especially this year. And then comes something else, and I think it has to do with our congregations, definitely in Israel, but maybe also in North America, about people who are interested in what's going on, but they cannot really bring themselves into the synagogue. They're reluctant, they're interested, but they're not. So what do you do with them? And here's the Mishnah is saying, and so too, one who was passing behind the synagogue or whose house was adjacent to a synagogue. By the way, if you live in Jerusalem, 80% that it is you, right? Because there are synagogues everywhere. And if that person heard the sound of a shofar or the sound of Megillah, if it's Purim and they read the Esther Megillah, do they fulfill the mitzvah? Yes or no? Because we can tell them, friends, you want to hear the shofar, enter the synagogue. Why do you just stand behind the synagogue? Or if you live there, do you really want to hear the shofar? Yes or no? And the Mishnah dictates in this case, if they directed their hearts, they have fulfilled the obligations. But if not, they have not fulfilled the obligation. Even though this one heard and that one heard, this one directed the heart, and that one did not direct the heart, right? So what does it mean to direct the heart? Right? Today we talk a lot about the concept of kavanah. But I think in the times of the Mishnah, you could understand it at least in three different ways. Lechaven et halev, to direct your heart, can be a physical thing, right? If you pass behind the synagogue and you stop for a minute and you turn to hear it, right? The heart in the ancient world was the dwelling place of wisdom and of moral. So if you direct your heart, it means that physically you show that you take it seriously and you want to hear the shofar. That's one understanding. The second understanding is kiven libo, direct your heart, direct the heart in a halachic way. You direct your heart to fulfill the mitzvah. Checked, did it. And the third understanding, if we open the mics and I would ask you, I believe that most of you, and including me, would think about the third options. And then this is the kavanah in the more profound way, the utmost intentionality that we have when we do something that is sacred, then when we approach the divine, right? When you hear the shofar, you direct your heart to really accept it, to really have a kavanah in a profound way. But as you see, the Mishnah does not dictate here. It kind of leaves it open. It leaves it kind of open. But then the next Mishnah goes to something that is completely different and unrelated. But I think the mere fact that it's juxtaposed what we just read shows you what the Mishnah really wants, the sages of the Mishnah really wants from you. And it talks about the war of the Israelites with the Amalekite, right? We read about it in Exodus 17. And what's going on there? When Moses raises the hand, Israel prevails, right? When Moses lowered the hands, Israel loses. And Moses at that moment is not a young fellow. So he has Joshua and Hur on his both sides holding his head up high. And one can read it and say, but it's not related. We're interacted Rosh Hashanah. We just talked about the shofar. How is it related to talk about this, the war of the Amalekite? But we'll see in a second. So the verse that we have here is, and so it was when Moses raised his hands, Israel prevailed, etc. And then the Mishnah is outraged. And is it Moses' hands that makes success or breaks success in war? Is it like, hands up, hands down? Is like a children game? Is that what it's all about? And then, no, Ella, rather, this comes to tell you that whenever Israel would look upwards, right, in a symbolic way, and subjugated their hearts to their Father in heaven, they would prevail. And if not, they would fall. So I think juxtaposing this Mishnah with the previous one that we just read, it kind of shows us that the Mishnah is telling us you can lechaven et halev, you can direct your heart in many ways, but really, you should do it properly. You should do it with all the kavanah that there is. Now I want to share with you a very short clip. So this was just a short representation of the shofar in Jewish law, who qualifies, who fulfills the mitzvah, and who didn't, and what are the rules for that, right? Because they're not asking about a person who is in the synagogue. They assume that if you are in the synagogue, you do have intention to fulfill the mitzvah. But what happens if you walk behind the synagogue? Okay, now I want to show you something that is very different from the Dibuk. I'm sure many of you know the Dibuk. It is a play by Ansky. He wrote it in the beginning of the 20th century, and this was the most famous play of Habima and the actress Hana Rovina, who played Leah, was the main part. And Dibuk is a possession, is a spirit or a malicious being that enters the soul of a person, typically a young woman. Of course, psychologists would understand it today in a different way, but that's how they understood it, as a dibuk. And here we have Leah, who she has to get married. She's a bride, but there's a dibuk inside of her. Then there's a very dark secret going on in that family. We're not going to talk about that, but I want to show you how they try to make where is it? How they try to get this dibuk out of her. So we have Rabbi Azriel, who is the rabbi of the congregation, and he's trying to persuade the dibuk to go away. Wait a second. Tell me if you hear well. So he says to her, please leave, we'll treat you well, we'll be nice to you, we'll be kind to you. And she says, and of course it's in Yiddish, the film is from the 30s. It was directed in Warsaw. And she said, I'm not going to go away. Not she, sorry, the dibuk inside her. She said, I'm not going to go away. I'm trying not to cover the translation for you.
Heraustreiben vom Ruf von einer jüdischen Tochter. Ruhe, was will ich herausfinden?
Rebbe, wir geben euch Beschuss, unser Nomen, mit unserer Macht, heraustreiben, in den Ruf einer jüdischen Tochter. Ruhe, was will ich herausfinden?
Dibuk, der Schone von der Menschen, was ist weg von unserer Welt. In Nomen und mit der Macht von der heiligen Rede hin, bin ich Azriel ben Hodos Geuser auf dir, du sollst verlosen dem Ruf und der Psule Lebas Chano, und nicht, wenn ich dich machrim.
Ich furcht mich nicht, Harayre Klules in Charumes. Nicht du, als der höchste Heuch, soll sich gleichen zu mein niedrigen Ruhr.
Michael, sollen alle unter weiße Kitteln, soll man bringen sie in Scheufress und halt zureden zum Heile.
So he's preparing the excommunication ritual. He's telling everyone to dress in white, and to bring a shofar, right? Shofar is an important part of this ritual, and to bring 7 black candles. For some reason, they didn't have it in the play, but in the movie, but they have it in the play. 7 black candles.
Also sollen sie sich zerstreiten. Hartnäckiger, in widerspänniger Ruach, mit dem Keuch von allmächtigen Gott, im Namen und mit der Schutz von der heiligen Rede hin, zerreiß sich, was wir dann war das, die letzte Fälle, was verbinden dich mit unserer lebendigen Welt, und mit dem Ruf, und mit einer Schäume von der Psule Leo Baschano.
Weiden.
Und wir bin dich, Achrim! ביניהם כלל ישראל. כי יא...
Ich kann sich mehr nicht langweilen.
Ist sie runter,
Sucht noch mir Kaddisch.
dann
So you see that the moment that the dibuk is surrendering is the moment when they blow the shofar, which is like that's just like the maximum. You know, you cannot disobey this. The dibuk disobeyed the rabbi and disobeyed the community and the father and the grandmother. But when you blow the shofar, that's it. And if you heard what she said, "Ich hab kein koach" or something like this. I have no power anymore. Just say Kaddish for me, right? So you can see how the shofar plays an interesting role between life and death, between the world, and that's actually the name of the play, between the worlds. So I don't know, Rabbi, if you want to
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
this is a good place to pause, and I wanted to ask you some follow-up questions, and if anyone has questions, they can put in the chat and I'll read them and incorporate. But I'm thinking about what you're saying of the shofar directing our hearts, that we have to, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the shofar, our hearts need to be directed to it. But that, in conversation with the idea of the shofar being a wake-up call. And I'm curious how you think about that if you haven't directed your hearts. But and it's funny you say this, I don't know if you could hear it. I think they're doing some shofars back here or school. As I can hear out in my office, but the shofar, you have to direct your heart, but it also is supposed to wake you up to do that. So how do those two things work together?
Right. I think that's a very complex situation, and in a way, what do we do when we blow the shofar? Right. This is I think the interesting thing, and I actually brought you some. Maybe I can show you a text a little bit later. Who should be affected by the voice of the shofar? I think that's what comes from your question. How and who should be affected? And you will see that there are two very different understandings in our culture. So in the story of the dibuk, did it affect the dibuk, Leah's dibuk, because she believed that that's the case and it was a psychosomatic thing, or did it have a power unto itself to change her? I don't know. I cannot answer this. Yes.
And that I think goes to that point of the shofar being the voice of God. That what is that really intense power that the shofar might have? And there's something so incredible about that idea of, it's a voice that is not a human voice. It's a sound that's not a human sound. And even just when you're showing the text, I was thinking about even the language of kol, that the Torah uses the word kol as sound and voice, that it's both. And there's something about the shofar being, it's a sound that we hear, but it's also perhaps a voice. And, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that, something pretty amazing of, that really directs us to hear a certain voice. Not just a sound that's coming out of this horn.
Right. I wanted to add to what you say that, yes, it's not a human voice, but some people hear it and they think it's the cry. It sounds like a cry of a baby, right? So it goes back to the beginning of life. And some has connected with death or the slaughtering of a bull. So it's something that you can really bring yourself into it. But nevertheless, you cannot have the sound of the shofar without the human breath, the human spirit, the human soul, the human neshima, right? You know that the word neshama, soul, and the word neshima, breath, in Hebrew are connected. They have the same root. So even though it's something that it cannot be played, it's untamed, it's primordial, you need the human breath
Mhm.
to make the sound. Yeah, so that's, I think,
And I think that connects to a lot of how we think about our Jewish life. There's the engagement between the human being, the human learning, the human breath, the human questions with something that is beyond the human.
mhm.
That even if we're thinking about the holidays coming, that relationship between us going through the different prayers and, where you said this is a wordy time of year. We're going to be saying so many different tefillot, different prayers, and some of it has to come from us, and then who's listening? That it's something beyond us as well. And the shofar has those parts of what you're saying, of we have to activate it in some ways and use our neshima, use our breath for it, but then what comes out of it is something beyond us.
Right. And who is affected by this? I like the term that you used here, activation, but who is affected by it? So let me share with you, where is it now? I lost it, I'm sorry.
I know all the different screens and tabs.
I know, it's so crazy. It's just I'm trying to be efficient here, but sometimes it's wait a second. Where is my shofar? Okay, no, screen failed to. So basically, if I cannot find it, I don't want to waste our time. What I think is very interesting is that you see two lines of understanding of what do we do when we blow the shofar and why do we blow the shofar. One understanding, and we see them one next to the other. So it's not like, some of them are these in Leviticus Rabbah, right? This is the big midrash of Vayikra, of the book of Leviticus. And it says in one place, in one paragraph, it says when the people of Israel take the shofar and blow the shofar in front of God, God leaves the throne of justice and moves and sits in the throne of mercy. Yeah. So the voice of the shofar comes to affect the divine, comes to affect God. It does something in the divinity. Yes. When you blow the shofar, you activate something in God and you cause God to be merciful and compassionate over us. So I think it's interesting if we accept the Theodor Reich theory. What do? We sound to God's voice. I don't know, or maybe not. But this is one understanding, and the second understanding is, and this is more common, I think, in our circles. But shofar shapur ma'asechem. Why do we call it shofar? Because it comes from the same root as leshaper. Of course, this is a popular etymology, not a real etymology. בחודש הזה שפרו מעשיכם. On this month, you should improve your ways, your conduct, right? So the shofar comes to make us tremble, to make us think, to make us to make us consider our ways and change our ways. And then it says, the Leviticus Rabbah, it says, Im shipartem ma'asechem, if you improved yourself, if you're doing better, then I will become a shofar to you. Oh my God, I never noticed it. This is really Theodor Reich, right? Then I will become a shofar for you. What is a shofar, says the Midrash? You put something on one side and it lives on the other side. Very, everything is like air. It's going to be very easy. Yeah, I'm going to be good with you if you change your ways, if you are better, right? And remember, in Hebrew, the word chet, sin, is not like, the Christian sin. What is chet? Chet is lachti, to miss the point, to miss the mark. So we miss the mark, but we can always go back and do things right. And I think this is one of the greatest messages of Judaism, that it acknowledges our tendency to not be great sometimes in our personal lives, with our partners, with our children, grandchildren, with our friends, the workplace. We're not always great with everything. But it says there's always a chance to do tikkun.
And
right?
even
And I think that's a great message of Judaism here.
totally, and even as we've been preparing and we blow the shofar every morning in our morning minyan. And, I've been thinking about how the shofar, it exactly fits that trajectory of tshuva and of saying that when we sin, it's not about sinning and you've got no chance, because the shofar you start with tikiyah, you start with 1, you then go to shvarim to 3, you're a little bit broken. You go to Torah, it's shattered, but you end with a tikiyah again, with having it full again. That even if you're off the path, even if you miss the mark, the shofar, it kind of shows you that it comes back together again. You have a chance. That the whole idea of repentance is that you have a chance to put it back together.
Beautiful.
The sound is a imagery that shows that to us.
Right. Beautiful.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about our time, and thank you so much. I mean, I think you've given us so much to think about, and I want to just spend the last 10 minutes we have together a little bit about your book, if you would indulge me, because
Oh,
in thinking about it, you've created this work that incorporates teachings like what you gave us today for every month of the year. And we got to dive into one specific area of learning that I think we all are going to have so much to think about now when we hear the shofar. And, I've been thinking this year that last year, Rosh Hashanah, the first day was on Shabbat. And in our shul, in our synagogue, we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. So we didn't get to hear the shofar again and again give us all of that powerful voice. And this year, I know I'm really looking forward to having the shofar back.
right.
So that we missed it. And now I feel like we have so much to think about each time throughout the service that we're going to hear the shofar. So I want to thank you for giving us all of this learning. And I know I'm going to be incorporating pieces of this into our services. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What I did, I'll tell you a little bit about this project. I wrote it.
I want to hear about the project, and I also, if you could share with us, how should we engage with this project? And I say that because for those of us, who haven't gotten a chance yet to see your book, it's not a novel. It's not even just prose. It's not something that you can just read cover to cover. So I want to hear about how should we be approaching this text, this piece of learning that you've gifted.
All right. Okay. So I think, first of all, I think people, as we said before, people think about time. We deal with time a lot. I think Jews think about time maybe more than others. If we will remember,
Almost
Abraham Joshua.
I would say almost an obsession's time for us.
Sometimes, right. When Shabbat ends, when Shabbat begins, all these things.
Yeah.
But if you think about Abraham Joshua Heschel in his great novel, not novel, in his great book, The Sabbath, he says Jews were building cathedrals in time. Yeah, our houses of prayer were often destroyed. Jews were exiled. Jews were moved from one place to another. But there is the time, there is the cathedrals in time. Shabbat is a cathedral in time that no one can ever touch and destroy. And this is something that now that I think, I live in a place where Jews can really not agree on anything. This is very painful, very, very painful. I mean, I don't think we never agreed on everything, but I don't think the bitterness and even hate was so striking as now, as this year. We disagree on anything and everything and all the time. In families, some families, you cannot really have a Shabbat dinner because people are like at each other all the time. But if there's one thing we do agree upon, is time, right? No matter how you observe Shabbat, you know that today is Tuesday, in 4 days it's going to be Shabbat. So you can spend it in the synagogue or going hiking or even going to a mall or whatever, to the beach, to play soccer, whatever you want to do. to be with the family, to pray at home. Shabbat is a special designated time, and people do observe Shabbat in many ways, not necessarily halachically, but people do take our time very seriously. I think there was a study once that concluded that 98% of Israeli Jews celebrate Pesach. 98%. I mean, some people in some places you even eat bread on the Seder plate, but you do commemorate that moment. So time really affect how we understand reality. So I thought when I want to write something about our Jewish experience, I want to write about time. The book was written in Hebrew for Israelis, but it was very skillfully translated first to Spanish and then to German and now to English. And it is directed toward the English version, toward North American readers. Mm-hmm. I'm a Reform rabbi, but it includes many voices across the board. So you're conservative. You have some very beautiful conservative prayers and texts. It doesn't mean that everything goes. Yeah, I did not include racist or sexist or machoist or chauvinist or hateful things. But I really did try to expand the horizon to give a very healthy smorgasbord to all of us. This is not an encyclopedia, right? This is a tasting method of the richness of our tradition. I tried very hard to bring ancient materials, but also contemporary Ashkenazic and Western, but also Sephardic and Mizrahi, from all denominations, and especially, and that I do admit that I did try especially to include the female voice, because as we know, women are 51% of the Jewish population, but they don't really exist in many of our canonical books. And I'm not here to say that we are, Judaism is sexist. I don't think Judaism is sexist. I think back in the day, it was very strange to have a rabbi like you leading a congregation, right? But we, thank God, we live in different times, and we have to. And I feel personally compelled to bring women voices, and Risa is giving us a heart here. To bring the Jewish women's voice and Jewish women's ritual from Tunisia and from Morocco and from Germany. That was so. The first printing is out, and I pleaded before the publisher that we do include 2 paragraphs at least about October 7, about the massacre and the war, because I felt it very much needed. You cannot talk about Simchat Torah without this, unfortunately. So there's no like a big chunk of it, but it is mentioned there. I want to show you how this book is, what is the structure. So first of all, yes, there's a beautiful introduction by Rabbi David Ellenson. I know he was in your neighborhood for many years. He's a Los Angeles scholar of blessed memory. He was my very, very beloved teacher. And then each month has a clear structure. We have a kavanah, meditation for the month, and then an introduction at the gate of the month. We always have a poem of the month. It can be a traditional poem, it can be a modern poem, but something that has to do with the topic of the month. And then we have these short iyunim. I try to bring iyunim, I try to talk about things that you don't normally talk about. And here you did have to distinguish between Israelis and Americans, because in the Hebrew version, I had a whole chapter about Hanukkah and Christmas outside Israel. And this is not something that I need to tell you about. You can teach me about it. I don't need to teach you about it. But some places, when I talk about things that are more Israelis, I explain more. And then at the end of each month, I bring the prayers of the month. So things that have to do, and again, just a very short, small choice of the great variety that we have. So Tishrei, the month that we are approaching, is very, very rich. We have Rosh Hashanah and the Day of Atonement, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, but some months it really required some creativity of me. So, for example, Mar Cheshvan, we don't have a lot of Chagim and Mar Cheshvan. My kindergarten teacher told me that it's called Mar Cheshvan. Mar is bitter. because it's bitter that this month is bitter that there are not enough festivals on this day. So I had to think about what do I include in the month of Mar Nishvan. So one of the things that I felt compelled to do is to include the Ethiopian experience with the special Chag, the special holiday that they brought to us. It exists before they came to Israel, but I think we didn't know of it. It's a beautiful Chag that is celebrated 50 days after Yom Kippur, just like Shavuot is 50 days after Pesach. And it has a very interesting traditions. I know now it is celebrated in many kehilot. So this is basically about the structure of and how this book looks like. Every month begin with this medal, which is kind of a riddle because it contains all kinds of things that later on will be shared throughout the book. Let me stop sharing. And yeah, okay. And the idea is that, as you said, it's not a novel. I know that some people did read it cover to cover, but that's not necessarily the intention. I know people keep it near the dining room table and they open it in Shabbat meal. I know that Rosh Chodesh groups use it. I know that adult education have it. If you have a weekly meeting, maybe once a month, you open and you see what do we have this month. I know Introduction to Judaism classes use it. Do you have confirmation in your congregation?
We do not have confirmation.
You don't? Okay, so or bar mitzvah classes.
Right.
This is what you can use it in the family, you can use it in the congregation, you can use it in all kinds of youth situation. The one criticism that I did get is that it's kind of it's a little bit big, you know. It's not something that if you go hiking, you
know
would
what,
necessarily find it easy
That's
to
what
take in.
a digital version, or that's what scanning is for. It's because, as you said, like, there's kavanot, there's unim, all of it, it's broken up into these different places. So if okay, we're in this month and we're going on a hike. So we can take a picture of the pages that might connect to that day. And, as you're saying, on all these different points of engagement. And I think that goes back to the beginning of time.
Right. You reminded me, I forgot that there is I forgot that there is electronic version of the book. So
right.
you can I think Rabbi Harrison arranged with the CCR to get a
you can reach out to us, anybody who's interested in purchasing the book. We have all the information. We can send it to anyone who registered for this event. And the information is with us. So if anyone is interested, I know you said you don't get any royalties, but I think we hope to share it because of all of the teaching that is in here.
That's my reward. And so if you just one last sentence, I think you get a very nice discount from the CCR. I'm not sure what it is. Rabbi Harrison will be able to tell you, or you. But you can, if you look at the website, and maybe it can be shared with you. You can see a part of the introduction by Rabbi Ellenson. You can see the content table of contents. And you can see some endorsements. One of them is from Isaac Herzog, the president of the state of Israel.
And what wonderful other rabbis and teachers on here who clearly have seen this book and have just written wonderful things about it. So we really appreciate, as you said, maybe it's a little bit of a large book, but you know what? Most of the books in our canon are incredibly large on our shelf because of the richness. So I think
I appreciate it.
There's something, it doesn't seem out of place on a Jewish bookshelf.
Thank you very much for this. I just want to show you that there's a Spotify playlist of the songs that are featured in this.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you can download it, and the study guide with questions for each month that you can discuss with your friends on your own.
Exactly. And you know what, that's what felt particularly special that I've been thinking about. this is a book that is meant to be engaged with, not just for someone to sit and read it through. And of course, there's personal learning, but there's also learning that happens with other people. And how you've kind of brought this together and all of the resources here and all of the teaching here, it feels like a book that is meant to be shared.
I could not say it better.
So thank you for sharing it with us and sharing your wisdom and really all these teachings about the shofar. Really, I know, we're very close to the Chagim, but there's always time. So I'm thinking about all of the things you brought. I'm looking forward to sharing some of what we learned this morning with our congregation next week for Rosh Hashanah. And, as Roy said, thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi Marx, for making time in this busy time of year as we're all preparing for the Chagim. And you can look on our website for upcoming events. We love having scholars from all over the world, especially from Israel, to come share with us. So thank you. And whenever you're in Los Angeles, you're always welcome at Sinai Temple, and we hope to see you here in the future. So thank you so much. And
thank you very much, Rabbi Kornsgold, and thank you all of you for having me today. And may the next time we meet, God willing, it will be in a very different and much better situation.